computer. Okay,
Okay, sweet. I'm going to click start now. Okay.
thank you.
And webinar is live now.
Good afternoon, everyone that's online. My name is Amina Merritt, and I am a staff attorney at Housing and Economic Rights Advocates. And today we're going to be presenting some information about dealing with mold as a tenant. I have over 30 years of experience as an attorney here in the state of California, and I just wanted to introduce Housing and Economic Rights Advocates to you because you may not know that Housing and Economic Rights Advocates is a California statewide nonprofit legal services organization based in Oakland, California. HERA is dedicated to achieving economic justice for all Californians. And we attempt to do that by protecting all people from discrimination and economic abuses, especially in the realm of housing. And so today is one of our attempts to do that by presenting this workshop on mold. And we also have a variety of other workshops on tenant topics, and we give tenant team advice through our HERA staff attorneys. I'm one of them. And I wanted to mention too, by way of introduction, that you can put questions in the chat box in this webinar, and we will discuss the questions and try to provide answers at the end if time allows for that. So let's jump on into the topic of mold. Here's the agenda. You'll see that the first thing we're going to do is talk about the law that's related to mold. And we will talk about what mold is versus mildew, and talk about whether your apartment is making you sick from mold or mildew and what to do about that. And at the end, we'll give you some resources for handling mold. And I just wanted to make sure you understand these are not pictures of mold. Later on, we're going to have a fun portion where we do look at pictures of what mold does look like. So first of all, let's jump into what the law is related to mold. And I have to tell you that surprisingly, people don't understand there is no uniform mold law that governs all landlords everywhere. And so today I'm just going to go through briefly a summary of the federal and state and local laws that might apply to a mold situation where you live. There's no law that says landlords are required to do certain things to clean up mold, but we will talk about what does exist. Under federal law, there is the Clean Air Act, which is found at 42 USC section 7401, etc. And that Clean Air Act seeks to protect human health and the environment from pollutants to ambient, which is indoor or outdoor air. And it might impose liability on a landlord if the conditions are so bad that they affect the air quality inside your apartment or living situation. Air quality is governed by the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, which is a US government agency. And it's a big stretch to get to saying that mold actually affects the air quality, but it is possible. Under state law, California has the Toxic Mold Protection Act of 2001, which was enacted by Senate Bill 732. That law is found at California Health and Safety Code sections 26-100, etc. And I put the 2022 reference because it was amended then. The Health and Safety Code section states that when a landlord is liable for mold when they know or have reason to know that the mold exceeds permissible exposure limits or poses a health threat. Now, one of the problems with the statement in that law is that there's no definition of permissible limits. and they did that so that they could state that the mere presence of mold does not mean that there is a health threat. And in a few minutes, we're going to talk about how that compares to a local ordinance in San Francisco. But the other thing about the California Toxic Mold Protection Act is that the only legal requirement is that landlords are required to disclose mold to you if they know that it exists. And they're supposed to provide you with a guidebook or a link to information about mold and how to clean it up. And that's found at Health and Safety Code section 26147, which was amended in 2002 to specifically require landlords to comply with these two provisions. And that is really all that the law requires the landlord to do. Under state law also, California Civil Code section 1102 through 1102.17, which was effective last January, only requires notice of known mold conditions and a requirement to work with tenants to clean up the mold if they're advised of the presence of it, and they're to give that guidebook. So you may have been given a lease that had the guidebook attached to it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later too. This law applies only to apartments that have 4 or more units. Some additional state laws that apply to mold include Health and Safety Code section 17920.3, which lists the specific conditions that endanger life, limb, health, property, safety, or welfare of the public or the occupants. And that law allows a court to declare a building to be a substandard building if it has those specific conditions. And one of the conditions that is listed is found in subdivision 13, a visible mold growth as determined by a health officer or a code enforcement officer. And so later on, I'm going to give you the reference for reporting mold to your local public health officer or your code enforcement in your city or county. Another law is California Health and Safety Code 104-170, which establishes this fund to test blood antigens and collect blood. And the only reason I mentioned this particular law, the only reason it's relevant to mold, is that the notes on this law, on this statute, that relate to the passage of it, discussed asthma as a chronic illness that's a leading cause of child hospitalization. And mold is identified as an important trigger factor for asthma and related deaths. Mold and other allergen control is related to asthma control programs, and this particular code section specifically allows funding to collect blood and human antigens in order to study the effect of mold on asthma and it as a chronic health condition. The other source of law related to mold could be a local ordinance. And here's, I referenced earlier, the city and county of San Francisco has declared that mold is a public nuisance and that it violates public health law to allow mold to exist in a unit. And that is found at San Francisco Health and Safety Code section 581B6. And so your city or county might have a local ordinance covering mold in rental units. So you might want to Google your city or county and see if there is a local ordinance related to mold. The other source of discussion about mold will be your lease or rental agreement and whether it contains a mold addendum. And as we previously covered, California law does require a California landlord to include a mold addendum on their rental agreement or lease. And if you sign a lease or rental agreement, look for it, read it, make sure you understand it, because we have seen at HERA a variety of different types types of mold addenda, some that have expired that do not comply with California law requiring notice by the landlord and providing information on how to clean up mold that does exist. The American Apartment Association and other landlord organizations have legally approved forms that they hand out from their website, but some landlords do not include the addendum, and they try to present a lease to you that puts the burden on the tenant to clean up any mold that exists, and that violates California law. They cannot shift the burden to you to clean up the mold. The other source of law is what's called the implied covenant of habitability, which exists in every lease or contract that is entered into by a landlord. That means that the landlord impliedly is stating that that building or that unit is safe for someone to live in, that it's livable, and also is saying that this unit substantially complies with housing and building codes and standards that could materially affect the tenant's health and safety. And it's similar to a car warranty. It means that the landlord, by renting these premises, implies to you that the place is livable. And if some condition makes it unlivable, like mold, if it affects your health, it might breach the implied warranty of habitability. I refer you to HERA's habitability workshop, which you can find on our public workshop calendar. And you can look at that webinar to get more details on how to document and deal with habitability problems. Mold is just one additional habitability problem. The next topic we're going to deal with, so we've covered the law. This is the hard part of this webinar, is getting through the laws, because what tends to happen in the housing arena is that there is a mishmash or a combination of federal, state, local law that we have to look at when addressing a problem, and mold is just like that. There are a number of laws that may come into play, and the main information that we want to give to tenants is that you need to document. So let's talk about mold versus mildew. Know your fungi. And I use that fun phrase because mold and mildew are both fungi. They are both tiny spores, and they both develop from excessive moisture quickly. They can, mold and mildew both can develop within 24 to 48 hours after water damage or intrusion or moisture has occurred. And they both start as these tiny spores that release anti-allergens into the air. And so the difference between mold and mildew can be seen on this screen. Mildew generally appears on shower walls and windowsills, and it can also grow on plants, paper, or cloth. It looks powdery gray, white, or light brown, and it's usually flat on the surface of a moist area. You can usually smell it. It smells mildewy, foul, and it causes minor health effects. The difference with mold is that mold can spread on any organism, and including clothes, leather, and the difference with mold is that it usually grows inward and upward. So it intrudes itself into whatever surface it grows on. It begins growing inside the thing it's on, and it can eat into walls, ceilings, and other surfaces, causing substantial property damage. It looks fuzzy, raised green, red, or black, and it has a strong musty smell. And the problem with mold is that it is known to cause major invasive health effects. And this is really the problem for tenants who live in moldy buildings. So now we get to the fun part of this presentation, where we get to see some photos of mold. So here's a picture of a really icky looking moldy shower and bathroom, and you can see how the mold has begun to intrude into this wall here, because you can actually see it growing off of the tile up into the wall, and it's in the grout. Here also is an example of mold in apartment buildings under leaky sinks. When the sink is leaking, the mold begins to grow, and then it intrudes into the walls of that sink, and it can begin to release allergens into the air that can make you sick. Here are some more pictures of water damage that could lead to development of mold. You see these ceiling tiles are buckling because of water damage, and that water damage may be all over this ceiling and intruded into the interior of this structure. And so that is very dangerous. Here you see ceiling to wall water damage, where the water damage has leaked down all into the wall, and that may cause mold inside the wall, which can affect the air inside this apartment. Here you see evidence of mineral deposits on the outside of an apartment building. So if you go to rent an apartment and you see this on the outside of the building, that tells you that there has been some type of water damage and intrusion into this building, and that it may be saturating the entire foundation. You may want to question moving into a building with that. But as a tenant, on inspection, you may want to ask questions about that. This photograph shows you condensation on windows, which reveal the presence of inside moisture, and that can cause mold inside the structure of the window and the windowsill, and then start to intrude into the walls of the unit. And so if you see these conditions, you should say something about it to the landlord. Here I have some pictures about, these are microscopic photographs of mold, which can appear yellow, green, or purple, and then grow into fuzzy, raised black mold. These are microscopic photos of it. I just need to make a point that most people think fuzzy black mold is the worst and that it's the most dangerous. And once it's fuzzy black, that's when it's time to take action. No, all mold can be dangerous to your health, but fuzzy black mold is no more dangerous. It's just that it's more advanced in growth and means that it's been there longer. So if you see fuzzy black mold, that means that the condition has been there a while and that you need to say something about it. So this next slide gets to that, what the health effects are of mold. Mold, it produces these allergens which cause allergic reactions, and asthma attacks occur or increase. You can begin to get asthma attacks because of the allergens produced by mold. It creates potent toxins and or irritants to your respiratory system and even to other organs of the body. And mold can increase problems in people who are hypersensitive to allergens. It can cause hypersensitivity pneumonitis, which is also called lung inflammation. And those with mold allergies, asthma, or other chronic respiratory ailments could suffer more from mold if you already have a condition. The CDC estimates that one is 50% more likely to develop asthma living in a moldy home or apartment as opposed to one that is free of mold. And people, I put vulnerable peeps here because people who already have respiratory ailments can get really sick if they are in a place that has extreme mold. And those include the elderly, very young children, expectant mothers, and people who already have respiratory conditions. So what do you do if you see mold? My advice is that it depends on when you see it, where you see it. And so if you are moving into an apartment and you're inspecting the unit, Upon move-in, normally a landlord will provide what's called the move-in checklist. And this is a document that goes through the entire apartment and allows you to check off something that may be damaged or needs fixing. And so you need to document when, where, and what it is you see that you believe is mold, and ask for it to be fixed right away before you move into that apartment, or get a promise that it's going to be repaired. And also upon move in, make sure that you read your lease agreement and see if it has a mold addendum, and be sure you know what your lease says about what your responsibility is for the mold, for cleaning it up, for identifying it, and for notifying the landlord if you see it. Most accurate and legally appropriate mold addenda do say that you need to advise the landlord immediately if there is some kind of leak or water damage or water intrusion in your apartment, and that you also need to document that the dates on which you told the landlord about it, and that you asked the landlord to remediate or clean up the mold. And the same thing applies after move-in. Document, document, document. What do you see? Where do you see it? When did you see it? When did you first see it? And did you report it to your landlord? And what was the landlord's response to your report? Also know what it is that you can do to assist in cleaning your apartment or your living quarters to make sure that you don't create excess moisture in your apartment. And the guide that is required to be given out by landlords can tell you very specific things about cleaning up moisture, cleaning up water damage, and keeping your apartment free of moisture so that mold does not grow. You should visit your doctor if you experience health effects that you believe are related to the presence of mold. You can ask for mold testing or get it, but it's very expensive. One of the things you can also do that is not here, I put it near the end as a resource, is you can call your public health department in your city or county, or call your code enforcement and ask that an officer come out and inspect your unit, and tell that officer that you believe there is mold present in your apartment. Show that person the problem and see if that person might support you in addressing the issue with your landlord. So when you move out, be sure you also complete the move out checklist, which will say whether there are any leaks or water damage or mold in your apartment. And you can also document any cleanup that you did. Specifically note if you cleaned areas where mold tended to grow, and you might want to take photos of your bathrooms and kitchen and under your sinks to prove that no mold is present when you move out. Because you need to, tenants need to watch for attempts by landlords to keep the security deposit by claiming that the mold was beyond normal wear and tear and that it was caused by the tenant, and then try to make the tenant pay for mold remediation in that unit. And Civil Code section 1950.5 specifically talks about what a landlord is entitled to deduct from the security deposit. And HERA does have a public workshop on security deposits, which specifically talks about how mold is not necessarily a condition that a landlord can charge you for out of your security deposit. So that's an important issue to think about when you're moving out of an apartment. This is might be recognizable to many of you because this is a commonly found shelf at Home Depot, which we have all over the state of California. And many stores sell products that are designed to limit moisture. You'll see these bags of Ridx here. These things are designed to keep moisture out of places that normally do collect moisture. And then there are things that supposedly clean and remove mildew and mold. I just have to say a cautionary thing here, because as a tenants lawyer, I have heard stories from tenants about landlords purporting to clean up mold, where they simply paint over it, telling the tenant that this is a mold resistant paint. And I don't believe that there are such things. That mold grows on paint, in paint, over paint, under paint. And we've seen that problem in many apartment structures where the landlord tries to just paint over the boiler where mold is growing. So if you see that kind of condition, or if you're told about something like that by your landlord, it may raise a red flag, and you may want to look more deeply into what is actually growing in your apartment and whether your apartment is making you sick. And the important thing to remember is your duty as a tenant is to give notice to your landlord of any conditions that you feel may be causing health effects to you, to document it, and to ask for assistance from the landlord to clean it up. So final screen here, there are some resources here for addressing mold. The Environmental Protection Agency website has an entire section dedicated to mold, and it contains information, training. Some of the photos you've seen here are downloadable images that you can find on the EPA website, and also other educational resources about mold. They actually have a special mold website, which has all you need to know to identify and clean mold. The CDC, Center for Disease Control, has the US government website on mold, has basic facts about mold and its health effects. So here, code enforcement I mentioned earlier for your city or county can quickly be found in a Google or an online search for your city or county to find the address and phone number for your local code enforcement, and ask for an officer to come out and inspect your unit because you think the mold may be making you sick. Additionally, public health inspectors in your city or county can be found online. You can also find online a variety of businesses that test for mold levels at various prices, and many of them are very expensive. I have found that I did find a tenants association, tenant assembly in Oakland that actually conducted mold testing for public housing tenants. And you may be able to get with a tenants organization that would be willing to conduct mold testing if you live in public housing. We at HERA have found that mold in public housing is a huge issue, and it's something that we're looking into how to address with other agencies and other governmental bodies that can help us try to address the problem of mold in public housing. But in any event, there are lots of resources on the internet for identifying, cleaning, and addressing mold. So I hope that this webinar has been informative for you, and I thank you for your time and attention. This is my direct contact email address, and there is our website address for HERA. I welcome you to go on there and look at our public workshops link so that you can see the other topics that we have: security deposits, habitability. I think there's one on small claims court coming up. We have how to look at your lease, how to read your lease, the wealth of knowledge and information available on HERA's website. Thank you for your attention. I don't know if we have any questions today.
It looks like we do have a few questions. It looks like in the question and answer section, B. Coleman asked if there are any local ordinances in Santa Clara County about mold.
I cannot answer that question without looking myself. It would take me to do, and hello, Miss B. Coleman, because I do know that we connected over one of the public housing projects in Oakland that is a problem. And I know that you represent the Tenants Assembly. Is that correct? Can she speak to us or not?
Let me see if I can unmute her. See if that works. B, can you unmute yourself and try to talk? Maybe.
Well, it's okay, but what I will say for Ms. Coleman is to Google Santa Clara County online, Google Santa Clara County mold, and you'll see if there are any ordinances in that county that'll come right up on a search.
Okay, I just got the mute feature.
Oh,
Hey,
hi.
I actually did not ask about Santa Clara. I'm not sure whose question that was. I'm in Oakland.
Right, I did know you're in Oakland.
Yeah, so I hope that person gets to look up that answer. I was actually asking about what happens when the landlord supposedly cleans or paints over it and the mold comes back. Is that just, go back to inspectors? There, obviously, as you know, like with OHA, there's a lot of unaccountability there. So I'm curious if there is a course of action for when someone says they did something to address it and it comes back.
Right, and see the problem with these public housing authorities, they are responsible for the condition of the public housing. And we have had discussions at HERA. In fact, we just had our tenant team meeting to talk about what we need, what plan of action we can have to address the problem of housing authorities being non-responsive. It is an issue all over the state of California. The tenant team for HERA has recognized the problem of non-responsive housing authorities, and we are putting together a plan of action that may involve asking for policy amendment or passage of law that puts additional regulations through HUD on the housing authorities not responding in a timely fashion, or just stonewalling people altogether. And I certainly am going to be reaching out to you, Ms. Coleman, because I know that you have a handle on the issue of public housing in Oakland, and it is an area that we are seeking to address.
Amazing. I definitely look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for holding this session today. I hope it was useful for everyone as it was for me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with a question?
Someone asked if you could put the resources for the mold links in the chat, but we will also probably have this webinar on our YouTube page. So the resources that I think you put up, people can find them by just watching the YouTube video.
Right, and one other thing for those who are listening, you can access this PowerPoint. It's going to be posted on our calendar, I think, on our webinar page. But we also will have these webinars are on our YouTube channel, so you can review it again. You can print whatever you need off of the slides that are part of this PowerPoint presentation. If you want to email me directly, I would be willing to send you the PowerPoint presentation. So take my email address down there, you'll get directly to me. And you can let me know that you attended this webinar. I'd be happy for any feedback you can provide. So are there any more questions?
I don't see any more questions in the question and answer section.
Great. Well, thank you all for your time and attention. And as I said, feel free to reach out to me on my email directly, or call HERA's intake line. If you have a specific problem related to mold in your apartment, call us up, discuss it with one of the staff attorneys on the tenant team, and hopefully we can offer some resources or some attention to your matter so that it can be addressed with your landlord. Have a good day, everyone.